The simple have little interest in hearing life taken apart and analyzed. Do you? Simple people don't care much for trick questions. Do you? However, the simple will give some attention to such matters if you first kick the shit out of them. How do you think that routine power struggles can become a posteriori seen as historical evidence of man's spiritual advance? There is the commercial dictum that says for success you should buy low and sell high. But here's it one better. Sell high and don't pay your wholesalers. This is a particularly tasty way to handle the knowledge of the collective you receive. The royal philosopher one day said to the king, "We are, all in one, but little water droplets in a gigantic iceberg drifting with no control to God knows where." And his grace replied, "Maybe you, hotsy thinker, but not me. I own the damn thing." And the regal reflector was suddenly brought back to his local senses and bowed down. So sorry, your most excellent excellency. I keep forgetting that you're the actual controlling force in this kingdom, and hence the supreme representation of its mind, and can thus imagine and say just about anything you damn well want to. And the king smiled, "Damn right." Down below, the village smithy had to keep slapping himself in the head with a crowbar to remind himself that everyone knew what the philosopher said was true, but that they weren't supposed to ever act like they knew it. Once certain brain cells have been overrun by the forces of the mind, they never again are easily able to hear told their true genetic history, nor destiny revealed. This is why most people with limited means prefer to stay at home. Automotive update. If consciousness were a car, then thinking is an aftermarket product. Fact, on this planet, cars will not operate properly without fancy floor mats and fuzzy dice. How one guy looks at ordinary available knowledge, quoting, "If you can look it up, it ain't worth knowing." One man named his firstborn, "You stupid son of a bitch." So, as he puts it, to encourage those to follow. With no need for any government form filling, you may personally apply this approach to how you look at the flow of thought once started in you and now a never-ending sequence. The present popular postulate, garbage in, garbage out, is both a bit late and a self-evident redundancy awarded undeserved profundity. Short version. Will creatures in a closed system Will organisms living in the stomach ever be able to realize their position without first being able to recognize and describe the inner wall of their abode? Churn, churn. Yes, genealogy, neurology, computer science, and finally cosmology and local medicine, all neatly wrapped up into one generally undigestible packet. Our spiritual short tale for the day. In this one universe, after he died, a certain man who had been exceptionally clever with words was given a position working in a full body, if you know what I mean, massage parlor. He toiled there through 3 more lifetimes before grasping the lesson intended. Could have been cruder with it. And now for a more local myth. One day, 2 creatures who couldn't speak were talking. Well, let's say a duck and a hippo, let's say. And the first one, in obvious reference to the life of man, said, "Words can excite, words can depress, words can inform, and words can entertain." And the second nonverbal one replied, "So, what's your point?" And now another installment of It's just how things should be. Genes speak in myths, and the more civilized they are, the more men listen literally. You might further care to note that this is how men came to treat history so reverently and imaginary goals so seriously. One mystic explained his intellectual purpose as being to clarify the present confusion and to spread fresh chaos. While out in the yard, one father said to his son, "Save yourself some cliche-drenched time and ignore the notion of trying to get a handle on things. Because I can assure you right now that the end of all such gripping devices is nothing capable of being held." The lad pondered, then replied, "Feeling confident that you have taken us into the garden of allegory as applies to man's collective civilized life, may I ask you if you did not mean to say that all of man's attempts to conclusively stabilize reality reveals that nothing is capable of being permanently held?" And as the old man bent over to turn on the sprinklers, he responded, "See, there's a perfect example of the collective's influence on you, in that you verbally seek to modify your way out of that which inherently has no entrance." Brief version. Believing that ghosts can be captured with improved ghost catchers assures the continued existence of ghosts. One man's outlook. People who believe anything are too dumb to deal with. And now today's academic news in dialogue form. Once you become smart enough to deserve one, why do they bother to issue? Once you become smart enough to deserve a diploma, why do they bother to issue you one? You can say that again. On this one planet, if you commit suicide while sitting down, it doesn't count against you. Neo automotive update. No one will change a tire unless they believe they have a flat. Fact. Now do you see why it's so difficult to discuss stuff like this? One man taught his son, read important books, have important thoughts. Eat important food, go to the bathroom. And being the dutiful lad he always is in such stories, he understood what the old man meant. See, this is why most readers prefer fiction and religious writings to humorous mathematics. Hobbies and essay. Everybody has a hobby. Even life has a hobby. Guess what it is? Hobbies. Hobbies are a terrible thing to waste. Hobbies, the end. After he heard that fish could drown, this one man didn't know where to turn next. So says one man, the mind and consciousness are way overrated. He then spit, burped, kicked some dirt, and left. Anyone worried over where life is going is worried about the wrong thing, if they aspire to ever understand where life is going. The young triplets were talking, and the first one said, "It's sad how much sadness there is in life." And the second one countered, "Nay, 'tis sad how much we take to be sad." And the third one chimed in, "For you two guys' birthday, I decided to give you either a book or a watermelon." And just then their father came in the picture and said, "I know what you boys are trying to do again. You're all trying to get in my head and make it hurt. Plus," he stuck in to work his revenge, "where's your other brother?" Moral. In a room with the door locked, silly putty becomes uncontrollable. Metaphors pushed even further and faster. Continuing to tell what kind of guy you are is not simply beating a dead horse, but imagining that you're riding it. A being from another world ended up on this one planet and began telling the locals what the universe was actually all about. And when the big guy got wind of it, he sent down one of his boys, dressed out as another alien, to assure all the people that the first visitor's commentaries were all just meaningless story weaving. All concerned, save one, seemed relieved. This was one of the original sources for subsequent conspiracy theories. Okay, another distinction between ordinary men and the broadly conscious. Ordinary men will get out to change a flat tire when they have one, while our kind of guys can look in so many different directions at once that the whole idea of going somewhere on a collapsible medium is ridiculous. Yeah. Then tell me, Professor, what does that mean that they wouldn't get out to change the flat? Flat? What flat? Note, even the most fun-loving of this world's leading religious prophets have never mentioned any road signs in paradise. Definition time. Your culture, well, actually, talking about your culture. The defensive device life provides free of charge to the intellectually challenged. Well, actually, to those who haven't the faintest idea of what's going on. I realize this got a bit convoluted, but I'll do better next time. Well, that is, unless I resort again to words. And now today's health update. A man who can be made ill by his own intellectual processes doesn't need guilt. One guy once figured, if I just knew how everything was connected, then I could unplug them. Man's mentation from a technical commercial view. The human mind is this planet's only product that consists solely of add-ons. The danger of everything, nicely summed up. Even beyond the routine and mundane, for instance, the way to think like a mystic is just to begin. See, the danger is that in anything, once you commence it, it tends just to keep going. Which, as unexpected as it may be to an ordinary mind, is not what being a mystic is all about. Okay, condensed version. If he can get there, a real mystic doesn't want to go there. After the special pair that had been put in the garden had screwed up, Life told them as punishment they would have to start talking. And one of them complained about it. Life said, okay then, you got to get into modifiers. And the poor creature's shrieks of horror could be heard over into the next county. The majestic justice of life. If you make fun of other people, they'll make fun of you. If you make fun of other people and you're smarter than they are, they'll never realize it or hold it against you. Boy, I don't know about you, but I feel a lot better. Once you understand what's going on, that part of your consciousness then becomes Gulliver amongst the gullible midgets. Now, boys and girls, I told you not to laugh at dwarfs. We're not, Miss Perkins, we're laughing at you. Oh, well, that's all right, I guess. Tee-hee, Miss P. See, I told you it'd all feel better. To keep the record straight, one guy was stupid only in his own mind. No one else's, just his. Ordinary existence. The only game in town in which not sliding backwards can be taken as making progress. A view of reality that does not include three views is a pig's view. Routine intellectual life will starve you if you're really hungry. And now a local weather report. Speech. A covering to keep the ordinary from being overly fearful of the fog. The Great Secret Work used to run a carnival, but stopped. When it became obvious that everyone wanted to ride just one of the rides, over and over and over again. Ordinary minds believe that they have successfully described something when they compare it to something else already known, while a futuristic thinking finds its satisfaction only through avoiding same. One mystic who had gotten a transfer and gone off to someplace else looked back and thought, the saddest thing about mystics is how they take all of the right things so seriously. Taxi! Overheard local conversation. Everyone seems clever on drugs. Is that why they take them? Yep. Then how do you explain bumbling drunks? Taxi? An everyday sort of chap asked a strange one, is being a mystic anything like just being real original and creative? And the guy replied, what do you think? Yeah. And the man said, well, that's what a lot of my reading seems to imply. And the strange one got just a wee bit stranger and split. Same as you should. One guy smiled as he thought, if ordinary people weren't serious, I'd have nothing to chuckle about. The problem with being more conscious and still living in the mind is the reality behind the myth of a frustrated Hamlet forever walking the circular walls of his dead father's palace. If you understand what something means, you understand it even if you don't understand its name. Living a life of routine consciousness is perhaps the supreme example of going along to get along. A mystic, in his own private way, doesn't play. Myth. A mystic from another reality came to visit this one world. And he tried to get the creatures, he tried to expand their view of what was going on. And he stayed there a while and talked to them. And finally one of his friends from the other reality came down for a visit. And he hung around for a while, listened to him talk, saw what he was doing, and finally said, Jesus, aren't you getting sick of having to beat around the bush? And he said, yeah, but what are you going to do in a three-dimensional universe? Is there anything to be said after that? Well, everything, to continue to refer to it as mysticism, the whole idea of there being some secret knowledge of some ancient tradition, some sort of knowledge or power that's still afoot in some form that is tied to the origins of reality, of creation. All of the known forms, which is the only ones we can talk about, obviously. Professor, that wasn't very obvious. Of all the known forms, they all describe a present condition of man. And then they all describe their goal. Everyone you've ever heard of, and I'll get to religion in a minute as being sort of a simpler form, but it can be instructive of how this all operates at a wider level. But I wanted to start out at what would appear to be a more specific, specialized area in which you might suspect there should be some exception to the kinds of rules and restraints that control ordinary thinking, the ordinary world. But notice, all mysticism, we could just start pulling them out. They all describe man being in some state, same as religion, but they always describe first a present state. And obviously, I won't even start with those of trying to describe the present state because that's kind of boring. Their state becomes a little more verbally interesting and exciting. But they all describe that man's in the present state. And if you showed up and you had some interest in that at any time on this planet, at any place, you know exactly what they mean, no matter what they say. You show up and they say, lecture on how to be more conscious, or lesson on the great tradition, the great secret, talked about publicly. So you show up. And they say, well, first off, you all look like sane, reasonable people. And you think, all right. And you say, you're obviously as unpleased with your present state as anyone else. And I'll do. You think, yeah, I am. So that is bland, that is broad enough to cover everyone. But they do point out the present state. Now, very often, when the more you go into the crude, simplistic forms such as religion, the more time they spend on the first part, that is, on your questionable present condition. Making sure constantly you do realize, which is where sin and guilt comes in, as kind of a simplistic form, but keep saying to the group, to the congregation, to the flock, well, now you do understand, nobody's perfect. There's no such thing as a real Christian or Jew, and etc. But suffice, or it should have sufficed, to say that all they have to do is ask you, even rhetorically, that your present condition is not what you envisioned when you were younger. That is not what you imagine is possible. It's not what you want. And the sane crowd of even would-be mystics, you go, well, no, it's not, certainly. Then they go on. Then they describe always. And it goes from everything they're describing each particular apparent form of this mystical, transcendental, traditional, secret work. Then they all describe, and the terms just go on and on, but some of the more common ones, they say, all right, you start off, they describe your present state. What do they say? That is, it is not workable, it is not what you want. Everybody goes, yes. Whether you be Indian, Russian, Aztec, European, doesn't matter who you are, you go, no, I'm not. So then they describe their intended goal, and it always has a name, and most of them, even translated from their original language, seems to strike. I mean, it just sounds a whole lot better than, buy a Buick or smoke a Marlboro. They have a certain sound. At any rate, such things, they start describing that their goal is for a man to become more awake, for a man to become liberated, for a man to become reborn, for a man to be resurrected, for a man to join with the Godhead. But you see, it covers, and some of them even sound, the last two I picked out are fairly common, but they're even contradictory, literally. Be liberated or to be a slave, to become joined, to become married to creation, to the Godhead. They all have a certain ring to it, but at least they describe something. And every place has some remnants, if not very active, it just comes and goes, but of some form of this kind of great tradition going on. And when it seems to sort of run its course during one generation or some period of time and gets revived, they generally come up with a new term. But there are only so many terms, you might say, that you can finally come up with. But there is a certain kind of almost arguably inherent beauty in to awaken. Of course, the ones that have used that, they first point out their description of the first state of man, the present state, is that man is in some low level of consciousness, that man is almost living in a form of walking about sleep. He's dazed, he's almost in a coma. And anybody that understands anything in life, on a good day, and their feet not hurting, and if they're interested in such as this, and if you say, without a whole lot of hectoring or preaching, you just say, you realize that normally you live, you motivate through life, do what must be done, and you're almost just asleep. You're just sleepwalking. You're out of bed and you're all dressed up and you smile and you react and interact with people. And people are worth anything intellectually. They go, that's true. So then it is beautiful to say, well, then our goal, what we're attempting to do here, the way we describe it, is we're attempting to awaken. And then they can add other things, and that description is one of the older ones, and they do continue. As I said, once it travels from here to there, or once it seems to have had one lifetime, they revive it, they'll add to it. So good old modifiers come in. As they'll say, to awaken to life, to awaken to a higher state. You can let that go for 100 years or 60 years and die out, and wait another 60 years and bring it back to awaken to a higher state of consciousness, which is not that big a thing, except to that next group, it sounds like new. And they may have even read the other thing, the previous description, that they know that some group 120 years before, 200 years before, had used the term to awaken. And then here it is 200 years later, and somebody shows up, and they talk about the low level of man's normal awareness and how he's almost staggering around in a coma. Yeah. And it says, our goal here is to awaken to higher consciousness. And the words are not that different. I'm just pointing out that there is always, in the publicly known forms, a describing of man's present state and then a describing of their goal. And why they become publicly known, even after the fact that we remember it enough for me to bring it up, is that it did strike a resounding, a useful chord in the people who were interested at the time. Verbally, I'm going to change for a second. The oldest records of religious history, the origins, but it's still verbally intact. But they all describe a trinity of forces. Everything from the most common, the Catholic Church, the Christian, the Western Church, here to the Vedic scriptures, the Western, what they call Hinduism, what Buddha said, that's now a religion, what Muhammad said, all of the major religions, all the religions, including the first one. I'll just tell you that for a fact, but it didn't have a name. But the first one, they start out, they all attribute the creative force, the creative power, the God, the Allah, they attribute it to a trinity, but without exception. And then, operationally, they ignore the third one, without exception. They will continue to verbally repeat it. I mean, Catholics, all kinds of Christians, they continue to pay lip service in the West. They call it generally the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And you've got the same version in all other religions of a trinity of forces, but then when it becomes operational, that is like the theology of it. But then the practical operation of it, they ignore the third one. Or put it in very simple terms, here's the way it comes out operationally. Then it gets to a matter of proper and improper behavior, acceptable, unacceptable living, good and evil. But they will continue. A priest, a rabbi, a Hindu guru can make some commentary, deliver some kind of message, some kind of speech on the nature of the triune energies that support, that create, that made the whole universe, that is the reality behind all of our perceived reality, and And they can say that within the same message. They may refer to it several times. But then they do not speak operationally. They do not speak as though there is a trinity of forces afoot practically in the life of man, the life of this planet. They would theologically, I'm sure, verbally, they'd have to say that that's two different things to talk about, we'll say the Christian church, the difference between good and evil, and the Trinity that is the Godhead. It's, well, that's not the same thing, and it is. They can't see it. The oldest religion, I'll put it in English for you, the original religion that has no name, the original religion, just using ordinary English American terms, regardless of what I know them to be, but this is a fair representation, was good, evil, and indifference. The words are not that important, but it has always been that. That was like the original religion from which every other religion sprang, and which, in a parallel way, all mystical traditions sprang. They all say it without any doubt. You cannot start a religion without there being, if it's going to survive outside of one guy's head. Any religion, not just the major ones, but anyone that were a new one to come on this planet now, that could distinguish itself theoretically and verbally from others enough to be recognized as a new religion, not just a conservative or neoconservative or reform or whatever, some old one. If they came up with a new one, I assure you, if they denied Islam, Judaism, Christianity, if they just said no, that's a whole new age. Now we've got the religion. I'm here to tell you. I'm giving you. It's not based on theology or spiritualism. It's based on the laws of physics and three-dimensional universe. It would have a trinity of powers. They would struggle to come up with names as far removed as they could in the West, for instance, to the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, etc. But they would have to. Their mind could not. They couldn't say it. They could not even make up a new religion. Or if some guy did, he would just be deranged. That is, it would have no following. No one would listen to it. There has to be a trinity of forces. But then, the third one is always absolutely, operationally ignored. It's not a plot, not a conspiracy, based on stupidity. It's the laws of physics. Laws of electromagnetic, chemical reactions in the brain. It creates a situation, which in itself is a lie. That sentence, it doesn't create a situation. The situation's there. But so as to continue to play like we're speaking the same language, it creates a situation wherein nothing can be absolutely described, assuming that is possible, which the mind ordinarily believes it is. Intellectuals believe that it's possible in a scientific way, that we're getting closer. And obviously spiritual people, those given over to everything from religion to the arts, believe that life is capable of being fully described. That's what life is about, by and large. That's why we're struggling. That's why we attempt to do good. That's why we study. That's why we go to school, is to be able to describe life, being a human, existing, having what, by all appearances and observations, seems to be a singular inner existence from any other creature we see. We strive and believe that we can describe it fully, and it's not possible under those conditions. That is the situation. If you do not take into account, even after they so aptly describe it, how about the Hindu scriptures, to take you away from your home neighborhood, the great forces, the creative force, the destructive force, and the sustaining force, spirits, God. They even sometimes put them into statues that I'm sure you've seen, and sometimes they even attempt to show their relationship to one another through the number of arms or through the way in which they stand, that they're posed by the sculptors. It is all in a crude, as best they can do, physical attempt to represent the myth that is the reality behind all of this, which is a trinity of forces. But that is probably a better description to Western ears, at least it's new enough, but it covers it to say that there are three forces that are the universe. Not one of them, not two of them, the constructive force, the destructive force, and the conserving or the preserving force. And it takes all three. And that there is put in English, it's struggle, as good as any. It's like a dance, but a dance is a struggle. I keep doing my little thing about the tango and etc. I always say it with two people, there's always three dancing. Or if you're real sharp, you already know by now, you can say, all right, there are two dancers, but where are they dancing? They're dancing on the third partner, the floor, the support, the conserving, the preserving force. You can look at a man and woman. There's a chief, an old one, that you can look at that as being a positive and negative force, or a destructive, a potentially destructive, and a potential creative force, just through the sexual nature of the preservation, the continuation of the species. But there's this dance going on. This is not two people. They're not floating in thin air. That can't be done in a three-dimensional reality. There's got to be a supporting force, the ballroom floor. The mind, originally in man, people have not become stupider. As I told you, the original religion, the first one, before it had a name, understood. That the first thing they said was, all right, reality is based on three forces. And I said evil. I was trying to kind of serve it up to you Western ears. Good, evil, and indifference. Same thing as constructive, the destructive, and the conserving. They knew that. The mind knows it. It is not theology, although it is obviously in words. It is not based on theology. It's not based on dreams. It's not based on speculation. It's not based on any of the ordinary areas that routine critics attack religion, upon which they attack religion. There's nothing to be attacked. It's not folly. It's not foolishness. It was keen, piercing insight. Well, I'm lying again. They had to do it. It wasn't that they understood. They just opened their mouths, and it came time to talk about matters such as that. And they, as you're prone to do the first time around, you open your mouth and life just blurts out the truth. Ta-da! Well, let's think about a God. Okay, there's three of them. You know, that's the way life does. So they continue. See, they can't even get away from it. You even hear, I don't want you to lose the point. It's not, when I say that ordinary religions, they continue to pay lip service. Well, serious lip service, such as the Western church or much of the Mideast thinking, the Far East, as I was wrapping up in the Hindu cloak, that there are three forces. They just say there is. They can't help it because it's true. Whether we're talking religion, if we turned it into some crackpot or some factious crackpot, into some little factious group, some little occult would-be New Age group, they all say it. Not because they know what they're saying, they got to say it. If they don't say that, then they're just babbling. So they have to say it, no matter what their after-the-fact rationale is. They can say, well, God told me, or I found it written on a piece of paper, or came to me in a dream. They got to say it, because it's true. So they continue to say it. What I was trying to get at, if you had never noticed, it's been going on to take the Western church as long as they have been almost a church. Let's say 2,000 years. They have been struggling with somebody coming along and saying, well, this thing about there being three forces. Yeah. What's this third one? It seemed like to me the first two, I can sort of understand a kind of relationship, kind of a father and son, or if they were a little bit better, if we were over in the Hindu description, I can kind of see it between a kind of constructive, creative force and then one that keeps wanting to go, come on, it wants to blow everything up. I can kind of see that. And the church says, well, good. And it says, but that third one, where the hell? You're either constructing and doing good, or you're destructing and trying to go against things. What's the third one do? And then they have to really begin to mumble in their beard and make, light more candles, or truthfully, because the mind after that, the ordinary mind, knows not what to say. And it's not the fault of the Western church, at least I'll leave you with that impression. If we take the Hindu, which in its full sense is even less of a religion than most Westerners think, but more of a philosophy, but it's stated, again, they had to tell the truth, that it is a creative force, a destructive force. They even call them gods. Those that understand it over there don't take it any more seriously than someone would here, taking religion seriously. That, well, yes, Shiva's an actual person. That one, but hey, there's his or her statue. That's the way he looks. He's here. But take that description instead of the Western Father, Son, and Holy Spirit thing, constructive, destructive, and sustaining. And for a second, you can get even ordinary minds, or else there would be no such thing as studies in Indian philosophy. That is, ordinary intellects couldn't even put up with it. What I was getting at is the mind can go, yeah, I can see that. There's like three forces kind of balanced out, that there's one trying to create or does create, and then one comes along and destroys. It's like epochs in time. It's like rise and fall of civilizations, and people do good for a while and then do ill, or people even die, and then their sons are born, their daughters are born, the generations go on. It's like the actual reality of reincarnation. I can see all that. And I can even see somewhere in between the rise and fall of things, the construction and destruction, there is some kind of like balancing force. Maybe that's what the Hindus mean. Maybe that's what the idea, there's some kind of middle ground in there. It can theoretically, it can philosophically make sense. It's not that I'm the only person in the world that can tell you this. that's what I was trying to get at. I thought I lost you, that there are plenty of ordinary, well-written, famous, or at least they got their degree off of in Oriental studies, it used to be called, studies in Indian philosophy. And they'll go into detail about this. I don't mean that they understand it, because we're talking about intellectuals now, just academics. But the idea of there being three forces, constructive and destructive, like we got carpenters and we got guys driving bulldozers. Or we got the good people in life, those that would build civilizations, the Platos, the Socrateses, the Pythagoras's. And then we've got, look up there on the steps, here come the Huns. And we got the Attilas. That's what history is. But it's like none of them gained the permanent upper hand. That just when you think things are going good, just when everybody looked around and said, Bubba, is that Roman Empire something or what? And they go, God, we ain't got nothing like that back home. And you think, how much better could things get? And you go back home and you decide to come back for a visit and bring your relatives next year, and you find out the damn thing's been leveled. And here's all these guys burping and riding horses, and they're illiterate. And you think, well, nothing is forever if you're a philosopher. And plus didn't want to piss them off. You go, well. The ordinary mind can grasp the fact that it can't deal with it. It's got no need to deal with it. It is not any sort of continuing awareness that it can hold. But it can grasp the notion of there being three forces. Whether you present it to just an ordinary sane person. They don't have to be religious according to how they were wired up. You could present religiously, philosophically. I could make crude things like I just did, physical. About the Roman Empire and the Huns. Or I could take a guy, if he was sober and sane enough, just a guy with a 5th grade education from Wildwood, Arkansas. And if I hung around there 5 minutes and took a look at the place, I could make, instead of the Roman Empire and the Huns, which you wouldn't understand, I could look around and talk for a few minutes at a bar, and I could give him an example right there, and he would understand when I said, life is not just good and evil. And I said, as a matter of fact, I just listened to some of you talk about, and I could just, some local gossip I'd heard. But the sawmill went up, and they got there, and somebody tried to unionize. I'm just making it up as fast as I can go. And then suddenly it burnt down, and people wondered, wait a minute, was it those Ledbetter boys that went over there? They never did like those Yankees, and those Yankees came down trying to... I could say, do you understand that it's not that goodness or constructive? Because everybody, look how many people depend on that sawmill. Am I correct? And he'd go, yeah, it was. I'm out of work. I used to work. Now, so you notice things get good. They seem like they'll reach a point, and then it's kind of like something happens, like destructive forces just come in. People can understand it. And then I'd say, but you understand, it is not just absolute. And let's say I bought him another beer. And I said, are you all that religious? And he said, well, not when I'm drinking, that's okay. This thing about the sawmill, and me talking about constructive and destructive forces, in religion, what are you normally? He says, well, I'm nominally a Baptist. And I say, well, how in the world do you know the word nominally if you 5th grade education? So he said, well, I'm normally a Baptist. And I said, so in that case, you have a piercing understanding, if I may say so, of good and evil. He'd go, yeah. And they don't teach anything in the Baptist church about some gray area. And then he'd get a real big laugh and probably choke on his beer, Slim Jim. Like, a gray area? Are you kidding? A Baptist? You are following this. It didn't have to be just a Baptist. I was trying to take it from a theoretical, from a philosophical level, down to a physical. That I can get a human mind. They can do it. To grasp that, yeah, life is not just boom, boom. It's not just construction. Everything's perfect. You don't just build a house. You don't just get married to a woman. And she's the most beautiful thing in the world. I mean, she just keeps you excited. The same guy, he can say, I couldn't believe it. After 40 years, my old man left my mother. Things that seemed perfect, my home life, or my wife left me, and I thought everything was great. I got sick of her. People can understand that life does not just go and reach some pinnacle of a marriage, of a business, of an empire, of a philosophy, of anything that reaches the level that any person, that any group, that any person goes, that's it. They have finally reached a point of success. That's it. Let's just assume that. Everyone knows it won't stay. If for nothing else, your genes know that this outer shell, the body's going to die. So it's not, it doesn't come as a shock. It's just people don't normally like to have it pointed out. But it is not. There's no such thing in a three-dimensional universe, reality, of construction. If we look at that as up, as goodness, of good. And then they're left with all these fortune cookie attempts and bumper stickers that they still wrestle with. Well, if God, or the universe, well, God, and they say in the West, if he's so good, how come my baby died? How come my mother's racked with cancer? Whatever the hell it is. And you can't answer it. Not on the basis of two forces, of two entities. There is mysticism and there is real mysticism. Mysticism is obviously known mysticism, which is why we can talk about it. But there's some real mysticism that you never heard about. Oh, you've heard about it, but you didn't know it. Yeah. Real, what people think of as the mystical tradition. Again, covering any era, any area of this planet. Mysticism is forced to play within the confines of the same game, which is why all known mystical systems point out man's present state and then point out their goal. And it can be called state of sleep, state of higher awakened consciousness. It can be called that. But what are they talking about? They're talking about good and evil. They're talking about God and Lucifer. They're talking about Allah and Satan. They're talking about the constructive force and the destructive force. Locked into an eternal, never-ending battle. Even the known, mystical, secret, great, cosmic tradition plays within the same game. Now, I told you there's a real one, though. How about the guy, the myth I made up for you, that this mystic that came from another reality to this one world, and he tried to tell them, let me do better than that. I didn't do that to you the first time. He tried to get the creatures there to expand their view. He tried to help them expand their view of what was going on. Remember, his buddy showed up after a while. The guy was holding meetings and talking to people, those that seemed really interested in his buddy. Slipped in. They obviously were both passing for local creatures, but his buddy slipped in, listened to it a while, watched what he was doing, and then one night, Jesus, aren't you going crazy? Talking all around and around, beating around the bush. And he said, yeah, but a three-dimensional universe, what are you going to do? That was not a throwaway punchline. In a three-dimensional universe, what else are you going to do? That is known as a rhetorical question. For those of you within doubt, which a rhetorical question amongst point-blank people is a statement. Yeah. That is, there is nothing else to do. I'll try for a fifth time. I'll make it a myth. There's a legend that says that one man, at least 5 different times now, thought to himself, he went, when you can, at the 5th time he thought a little more complicated. He thought a little more in modifiers. Maybe this will help. Legend. For the 5th time, this one particular guy thought, when you can kind of world-class high jump with your eyes closed and stumble through it and do it in your sleep, it sure is hard to make yourself think, well, shit, I'll take up the hammer throw. Obviously, the ordinary people can live with a polarized mind. They're not rioting. They only do so about crude physical matters. They are not rebelling up here. They can't, but I'm pointing out they cannot rebel up there. They live through a polarized mind. They live with 2/3 of an explanation, while believing that full explanations of what's going on are just around the corner. Right. If your mind will operate and you can stay sane and apparently look forward, I guess in quotation marks, to being able to coast for another 20, 30, 40, 50 years and not, as far as you can tell, not go sane, not become an absolutely stumbling alcoholic or addicted to drugs you can't really afford. And you think, well, I can get by. What's the incentive? If the tire's not flat, who's going to stop and get out and try to change it? Good enough for ordinary people. Took care of them quite handily. Now let's get into those exceptional people, the would-be mystics, the people who have historically and right now, today, to varying degrees, are expending energy, money, time, trying to pursue the idea, the feeling genetically that many people have, that there is some other knowledge, there is some way that you can realize what's going on, there's some kind of message going on genetically, there's some sort of core information that's still here somewhere. And God, I'd like to have it. I wish I could plug into it. I wish I could get my hands on it. I wish I knew what it was. So there obviously was no insult, no criticism at all now implied in this, that you would say by any measure, because we'll assume everyone listening to this would put themselves in that group at the very minimum. So you would say that would have to be, that group would have to be in some way in a better position or less satisfied than ordinary people are with their intellectual neural plot. But are you? Now, I made the guy say that 5 times now. Ordinary people, once Bubba finds out that, hey, being Bubba, I can do it in my sleep. Anybody can. That's what being sane is. I can Bubba it up. I can be Bubba in my sleep. Right. How are you going to get Bubba to try and be something else? No way. And in a sense, that's no secret to the Bubbas of the world, the ordinary people of the world, which is another reason that for the intrigue and apparently extrinsically acquired drugs to put in yourself of alcohol and other forms of drugs. It is even part of the less specific drug influence of being entertained, being excited intellectually through external means, movies, sports, reading. Drugs just a little faster to the point. So the Bubbas will be satisfied. And again, the would-be mystics, assuming that you heard some of this and realize I'm not speaking literally, better than that, would think at first, well, I am dissatisfied. Ordinary mystics, as opposed from what I'm insinuating of real, they still do not comprehend. You know, the whole thing about being a mystic, once you reach that point is, once you get started, it's hard to think, well, now that I can do this, maybe I'll take up the high jump. How about pole vaulting? But see, mystics then consider, I'm too far past that. And we're not talking about just Bubba, quitting being Bubba, trying to be super Bubba. We're talking about something that I finally acquired, and it makes no sense to think that there's something else to do, or that I should in some way change courses. There's a sure way to tell. There are more than one, but Jesus. One will probably give you a migraine. Well, I already slipped it in that Anywhere a mystic can go, he didn't want to go. And yet, everyone involved, as sincerely, as seriously, as intelligently, as well intended, as hungry as they are right now, and always have been right now, attempting to pursue some known mystical system, like I'm attempting now to be ever mindful, to hold my attention internally, and to be more awake, to be more in a more awakened conscious state rather than this normal one. You've got a hobby. You've got a reason to live. You are working on becoming a high jumper. And eventually, if you stay with it, and whatever it is, you will begin to believe. And I don't mean believe as a pejorative term. It will become reality to you that you are gaining the ability to be mindful. That is, at times you are more conscious. I'm not saying it's not true. It's irrelevant. Because then you can do it in your sleep. The way you can tell, that's what I was going to tell you, is that you're satisfied. Not just, no, I don't mean that. Now, any would-be mystic worth his mystical salt would say, oh, no, I'm not satisfied. And they think that has some higher significance. You can go back down to Stinkwood, Arkansas, and ask the local Baptist minister, are you actually a Christian? I'm a Christian minister, but yeah, are you a Christian? Well, no, certainly. You can't actually be a Christian. You're saying, am I perfect? Am I satisfied? Well, certainly not. But a mystic, in the ordinary sense, believes that they're beyond that description. It's the same thing. But now, they can be a striving Christian, they can be a striving mystic in their sleep. You can do it with one eye closed. All you got to do is show up at a meeting somewhere, sit in whatever position, do whatever, repeat, keep talking about, well, our whole trick is we train to be forever mindful, under all conditions ever mindful, and it will snap us. It will finally make us aware of the low level of intellectual attention or consciousness in which we normally live and snap us out of it. I already told you, they got it backwards. Once you understand the problems in a 3D world being run by a polarized view, it's the examined life that's not worth living. See, because they can't see it this way, but they've already examined their life and thought, wow, I see what's wrong now, because this system, well, the system told me I'm in a state of low level of kind of sleep, and I'm struggling to be more conscious. No. Now I got it. I knew that. As soon as I heard that, I knew that's what I've been looking for. That's the description. They now have the examined life. They're on the right track. The examined life's not worth living. If that didn't give you a headache, here's this one. That names and descriptions are just as important in the so-called mystical, secret, traditional world. Always have been. That's why the names are remembered in all these descriptions. The real mysticism, I told you, is a real one. The real one, it doesn't matter what you call it. If you got people that know what a non-standard state of consciousness is from their experience, they know what it is. It doesn't matter what you call it, because they know what you're talking about. Of course, the real question is, do you know in your own mind?